Hi everyone. Today I'm sharing something a little bit different. This is not a bread recipe, but it is made with bread and it uses a sourdough starter, so I figured it kind of qualifies for my channel. So today I'm sharing how to make bread kvass. Now, I've never made this before. I'm Australian. Kvass is a Slavic drink that is really, really popular in lots of countries in that region. And I've learned how to make this from this very interesting and very entertaining YouTuber called Boris. His channel is actually called Life of Boris. I will let you go and have a little look at his channel. It's pretty interesting. But I just wanted to give a big shout out to Boris. He's living in Estonia at the moment, as far as I know. Thank you, Boris, for this brilliant recipe. He'll probably never see this. This bread kvass is truly excellent and probably the best tasting homemade fermented drink I've ever made, and I have made a few. So to make this really amazing drink, you do need some dark rye bread. I've got a couple of rye sourdough bread recipes on my channels. Actually, one's on my old soap making channel. I'll put a link to those below. And this is actually a Borodinsky recipe that I was trying out for a friend of mine. So I can share you a link to that as well. But any dark rye sort of Russian style sourdough bread will work really well for this recipe. You need about 6 slices for the size batch that I'm going to make here, which is about double Boris's batch. He only used 2 slices, I'm using 6. You can see I've only got 4 here, but I put another 2 in the toaster. So you want to just use a pan or a toaster or whatever you can and get those breads just frying just in a dry pan to toast them. And while that's happening, put 3 litres of water into a pan, a pot that you're going to use to soak the bread in. So 3 litres of water in the pot and then bring that to the boil. So it's got to be really, really super hot. I brought it to the boil and then just let it come off the boil before I put the bread in. I ended up cutting the bread up into little pieces to make it, I don't know why I thought that would make it toast a bit better. It doesn't really matter. The point is that you get your bread toasted and nice and brown before you put it into the water. So I put 2 slices in my toaster as well, and I had to toast them about 3 times to get them dark enough. You don't want them burnt, like really, really black. Yeah, I don't think that would taste so great, but you want them really nice. See those really dark brown bits on those little pieces? That's what you're looking for. So not black and fully carbonated, but nice and brown. So you put all the bread into the water and just let it sit basically. There's the extra 2 pieces, so 6 pieces of bread all up in 3 litres of water, and they'll fizzle a little bit. And then to that you just add a handful of raisins. The raisins aren't strictly necessary, but they I guess they add a bit of flavour, but they would help the fermentation. But we are going to use some sourdough starter in this once this is cooled off, and that is really what inoculates this recipe, not the raisins, but you could use the raisins if you didn't have a starter. So I let that sit all day, and then I came back in the evening. It was a cool day. I wouldn't leave this for too long, like any more than 4 or 5 hours or so. If it was really, really hot weather, it might get a bit funky. But it was quite cool at my place, so I left it all day. And in the evening, I strained it out. So you want to sort of strain out this nice soaky, bready liquid. And this bread, most of these dark rye breads, they've got malted flour in them, they've got molasses in them, they've got caraway and maybe other spices as well. So you're getting some lovely flavours that come out of the bread. The flavour of your drink is really going to be determined by the flavour of the bread. So get some really nice, tasty dark rye bread and you'll make really good kvass. Now I just poured that into a big jar thinking it was all going to fit, but it didn't quite. So I've got 1 jar and a bit, and all up this made about 2.1, 2.2 litres of kvass, which is about the same in quarts, about 2 and a bit quarts. It doesn't really matter what you use as a fermentation vessel. You could even just put this back into the pot after you take the bread bits out. I just wanted to use my glass jar because I hadn't used it for ages and it was fun. So to the strained liquid, you just add sugar and some sourdough starter, but I added the sugar in first. I weighed out 150 grams of sugar, and this is roughly modelled off the amounts that Boris uses for his recipe. And I just kind of guessed how much I needed in each of those jars. I just put a little bit in that little jar. And here is my sourdough starter, which there's a lovely synchronicity here. My sourdough starter is actually named Boris, and I named it many, many years ago, probably before Life of Boris YouTube channel was even in existence. So how cool is that? My starter's name is Boris, and now I've discovered Boris's recipes. So that was pretty cool. So a little bit of my Boris goes into the Life of Boris Kvass recipe. Oh, so cool. Actually, Boris, in his recipe, he uses yeast in his recipe, which you could also use if you wanted to, but I wanted to use sourdough starter because that's what I have, and I figure that's going to make a bit more of a natural tasting ferment. So you just mix that sugar and that sourdough starter in. I didn't weigh or measure the sourdough starter you saw. I just put in a bit of a blob into each jar, and I also add a few more raisins, which will also help the fermentation boost along a little bit. And the raisins are also really handy because when they start to rise, you know your ferment is getting gassy, so they're a nice little fermentation indicator as well, which you'll see. So in the morning of day 2, oh that's right, I decided to see if my chooks would want to eat some of the leftover bread that I strained out of the liquid. And my chooks, they're clever. You know what they did? They picked all the raisins out, didn't they? They did eat some of the bread. Normally they really like soaked sourdough bread. I do give them some bits, but they just went for the raisins. They know what the good bits are. And here it is. Just after I fed the chooks, I came in and I just gave it a stir. So this is day 2 in the morning. Just give it a bit of a stir. And stirring just helps spread out the sugars and, you know, any of the nice fermentation goodies in the jar. And it also prevents any molds or anything from forming on the surface. And you can see there's some nice little fine bubbles forming on here. So we know that we've got fermentation happening. And day 3, here we are. I did stir them again the night before, as you probably just saw there. But by day 3 in the morning, these 2 jars were bubbly enough for me to know that these were ready to bottle. So I just strained out the liquid, trying to leave behind the solids from the sourdough starter, if you can see that in there. It's not really going to hurt if you get that into your bottles, but I think you'll get a nice clearer liquid without any sediment in your bottles if you try and leave that behind. So basically this process, just straining it out into something that you can use to pour into bottles. I had a little taste test here. Oh, that's so good. It was pretty impressive. I couldn't believe how good it tasted actually. And to one of my bottles I added a bit of lemon juice. Actually Boris adds lemon slices in his ferment, which I didn't do because I didn't have any lemons. But I just added 3 teaspoons of lemon juice to this one bottle just to see how that would go. So I'm using PET plastic beer bottles that I got from a homebrew shop. I've had these for ages. I use them for all sorts of different things and just clean them out. And this amount, these are 740 ml bottles. This almost filled 3 of them. So that worked out pretty well. So I've got 2 that are plain and 1 with a little bit of lemon juice in it. And I just set those aside. The beauty of the plastic bottles, I know Boris is not a fan of these, but I find them a bit more safer. I feel more confident. You can press on them, and when you feel that they're getting really hard, like this is in the evening, see how firm that is? It's got hardly any give. It gives you an idea that they're getting some really good gas built up inside. And because they were quite firm, I decided to put them in the fridge to finish off the carbonation and to cool them down. I'm a bit scared of using glass bottles for fermenting drinks, to be honest with you. I've heard some horror stories of glass bottles exploding and all sorts of scary things like that, so I just prefer to use the plastic bottles. So you can refrigerate them for a few days and they will get really, really bubbly. I just tried some this morning editing this video, and it poured out with a nice big head on it like a glass of beer. But I couldn't wait, and this is only the very next day. I don't know if you can see, but there's lots and lots of tiny little bubbles there. And when I drank this for the first time, this is the same footage as I showed at the beginning of the video. I could not believe how fizzy it was. Really fine, beautiful, nice small little bubbles, and the flavour's just incredible. So thanks for watching, everybody, and thank you for your support. If you enjoy this video and some of my other videos on Ellie's Everyday Whole Grain Sourdough channel, please feel free to share them with others who might be interested. And if you'd like to provide some financial support to my work, please head to my Buy Me a Coffee page. I'll put the details below. It's buymeacoffee.com/ElliesEveryday, and you can make a donation there if you'd like to. You can also hit the thanks button in YouTube now and make a donation directly in YouTube if that's your thing. But I appreciate all of your support as always. And I'll see you again soon for another bread video. Thanks everyone. Bye.